We're just getting the recording started. Getting the recording started. All right. Tyler Dickey, manager of the MPO, call the meeting of the Bend MPO Technical Advisory Committee to order. And Kelly, actually, we'll do a round of introductions in here first. You want to start, Kelly?
Sure. I'm Kelly Kennedy. I'm with the Bend MPO.
Henry Stroud, Bend Parks and Rec. Kevin Howard, City of Bend Engineering and Infrastructure Planning Department.
Andrea Bro, Cascades East Transit.
Greg Bryant, resident.
And then online, can you help me, Kelly, with
Yeah. Online, we have Andrea Napoli with Bend MPO. We've got Robin Lewis with the City of Bend. Dave Thompson with Deschutes County. Brian Potwin, Commute Options. Is that right?
Yep.
Chris Doty,
Deschutes County,
Deschutes County. Thank you. Ashley Briers.
Federal Highway Administration. Actually, Ashley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi there. I'm Ashley Briers. I'm with FHWA. I started about a month ago. Nice to meet you all.
You're good.
We have Gary Bonham, the resident.
Yeah.
Ken Schonkweiler with ODOT. Angie Brewer with the DLCD. Thank you. Brad Tower, City of Bend, right? And Casey Berg.
OSU Cascades.
Thank you. I think that's it online.
Did we miss anyone? So the meeting is being recorded. You've all been through this. If you have questions, just please raise your hand if we're in the middle of a presentation, or save your questions to the end of our presentation. You can also you can also close caption the presentations or the recording or the meeting if you'd like. And with that, I'll move to agenda item 3, which is public comment. Do we have any public comment online or in the room? All right, so agenda items 4 and 5 are review and approval of draft meeting summaries. The first one is approval of the October 4th draft meeting summary.
I move approval of the October 4th, 2023 meeting summary as presented.
I'll second. Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Agenda item 5 is review and approval of the November 1st draft meeting summary. So again, looking for a motion in a second.
I'll move approval of the November 1st, 2023 meeting summary as presented.
I second.
Any comment? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, Andrea, do you want to introduce this agenda item?
Sure. So this is giving an overview of the project status of projects that the MPO had awarded a portion of our surface transportation block grant funds to. We had a project solicitation in 2020 and another one in 2022. And in 2020, the board had asked if there could be periodic updates to projects that were awarded funding. So these projects were awarded fiscal year 2021 through 2024 funds. So Henry will talk about the parks projects. Robin will talk about City of Bend, and Sharon actually couldn't make it today, so I will give an update from information that she shared with me on that project.
So, Henry, I've got the presentation.
Sure.
I'll just let you go.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm gonna give a quick update on two of our projects that were funded through the SPPG program. The first project is the Gilcrest Bridge Replacement Design Project. And Tyler, you can go to the next slide. And so just as a reminder to everyone, the goal of this project was to complete 30% designs for a full bridge replacement. And we were awarded $100,000 for engineering and design in the last round of STBG. So just to remind you guys, the bridge is a wooden structure. It connects Columbia Park with Riverfront Street. And the reason that we wanted to replace this bridge was that it's an aging structure. And primarily the surface, there's not enough width for two-way bicycle traffic. And it's kind of like a rough wooden structure. It's not very pleasant to ride over. And then there's also some concerns with the steepness of the approach, particularly on the east side of the bridge. One thing I just want to point out is that this project is immediately adjacent to another Bend Parks and Rec project. So in the photo on the right, it's a little hard to see, but there is kind of a failing riverbank. And so we are currently in design to essentially do riparian restoration and to create a armored dedicated river access point. There's a historic river access point there that's been closed for the last couple of years due to the failing conditions. Slide. So in terms of the progress we've made since we've started, we did work with the City of Bend to have an engineering assessment of the bridge undertaken. That was something that they did. It's actually their infrastructure. And one of the surprising things that we found out from that assessment was the substructure was actually in much better condition than we had originally anticipated. So we kind of shifted courses a little bit, and we talked to the MPO, talked to the city, and said, hey, we think that we don't need to do a full bridge replacement, and that we can probably just replace the superstructure that's above the girders and the abutments for the bridge, and then also do some kind of maintenance and restoration on that substructure just to really shore it up for the foreseeable future. So also, after the engineering assessment was complete, we then moved forward with our adjacent project, and we created a set of preferred alternatives for the different access points that are being restored as part of this larger project. So we did complete the preferred alternative for Columbia Park, and that incorporates this idea that we're going to do adaptive reuse of the bridge. It was important for us to know if we had to fully replace those abutments, because that would impact the adjacent project and the design. Yeah. And then the last thing that we've done is that we've completed an IGA between the city and Bend Parks and Rec that essentially outlines our roles and responsibilities, because it's city infrastructure and we're doing the designs for it, and potentially the construction as part of our project, that we had to have that IGA in place. So that, you think those things are easy, but I think it was a 6 or 8 month process to get that document done. Moving forward, so we're having a re-kickoff meeting with ESA, who's our consultant for this project, to talk about the bridge specifically after the new year. And talking to Ian Isaacson, who's my colleague and the project manager, he said that he anticipates the 30% design completion, which was the goal of this project, by summer of 2024. We're hopeful that because we're not doing a full bridge replacement, we may be able to advance those designs a little farther than 30%, which was the original goal. So that will kind of remain TBD until we really start getting into this design process.
So question from me, since you're not going to be able to do as much, the 100,000 was for engineering. So now we should go a little bit further than what you just saw.
Yeah, the 100,000 was for 30% designs. Essentially, we think that we'll be able to go a little bit further, but we're not sure. So that's kind of TBD. The problem with construction and design costs kind of skyrocketing is that we're having to temper all of our expectations. So how far we can get, but we should meet the objective that was part of the grant application.
Good.
Sorry. And then just real quick, I just want to show you guys this. This is the preferred alternative. This isn't. This is a really crummy picture from Google Earth that shows the existing conditions. But if you go to the next slide, there you can see what's been proposed for the site. I'll kind of just go over some of the elements. So you can see the bridge deck. We're hopeful that it's going to be widened and improved. We're making improvements to the trail that runs along the riverbank. Currently, it's an aggregate trail. The goal is to pave that trail. It's part of the city's greenway system and low stress network. And then on the far right, there is a new kind of boulder terraced river access point, and then also some riparian restoration that would be done as part of this project. And then Andrea also wanted me to give just a quick update. This was a separate project. We were awarded funds in 2020. So this was to do essentially safety enhancements at 3 different crossings of Central Oregon Historic Canal Trail. We awarded $64,218 in between 2021 and 2022. There was kind of 2 separate awards. We had asked for some more money for this project. That project was split into 2 phases. The first 2 crossings that we focused on were Blakely Road and Broster House Road. And then there was also an additional crossing, a Ferguson Road, which was part of this original goal. So in terms of the project, we completed Blakely Road and Broster House Road, but we had to abandon the Ferguson Road portion because the city had a sewer pipe project that was coming on along Ferguson Road. So as part of their project, they agreed to do some limited improvements of the crossing in terms of installing a driveway apron on one side of the road that didn't previously have one. But just because of the length of their project and kind of the length of our ability to do this project, we essentially abandoned that. And then we returned just over $18,000 of unused SDG grant funds to the MPO. And then those were reallocated to other projects years ago. That's all I got.
All right, is that your last?
That's my last.
Does anybody have any questions for Henry? Ken, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Henry. You all have some really exciting stuff going on right now. On this slide, so the 2 phases of the project, has the Blakely Road and the Broster House Road project already gone to construction?
Yeah, those were completed about 1.5 years ago. It's at Blakely Road, we installed new striping across the roadway, as well as crossing signage and crossing warning signage on the roadway. So it was mostly focused on improvements on the roadway. And then we also installed detectable warning strips at each one of the driveway entrances. So it was not a major change, but there was almost no signage out there previously. At Broster House, the improvements were mostly focused on the trail side of things to direct trail users to an existing signalized crossing at 3rd and Broster House. In a perfect world, we'd be able to rebuild that signal. It's a little inadequate in terms of width for trail use, but it's what's out there, and that would have been a really, really major project. So that had some resurfacing, some fencing that got put in that kind of forces trail users or encourages trail users to not cross at the Ditch Rider Road and to utilize that light.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Henry before we move on? Thank you, Henry. All right, next up is, I think, Robin, you're going to be leading or walking through most of these. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then both Brad and Kevin are Brad's online and Kevin's in the room with you guys. If there's further questions on their projects, they can go into in depth. But yeah, I'm able to report on these.
All right.
So there were quite a few, and I'll go over each of them in detail. Similar to Ferguson, the DRT Archie Briggs will have $65,000 that can be unencumbered. So I'll go over that when I get to that project. But this slide just shows the award and then how much that we're anticipating spending. And most of them will be able to utilize the complete fund. Next slide. So next slide. 8th Street. The running theme between all of these projects is really that the STBG funding allowed us to leverage other projects and utilize project managers that already had an adjacent project, and this allowed them to expand the scope of their project. So for the 8th Street sidewalk, $180,000. We paired that with some go-bond projects for the neighborhood street safety program, and we're able to extend sidewalk and 2 crosswalks. This is just a photo of one of the crosswalks. You know, before conditions, there was nothing out there, kind of a path that users had created, really inadequate infrastructure and illumination for crossings. And this route is used to get to a couple of pretty popular parks, one on the west side at Seward and 6th, and then the Holland's Head Park, which is more of a regional park, as well as school kids going to Juniper and Pilot Butte Middle School. So it was constructed this summer, and we're working on some final closeout elements. This photo doesn't show the signing and things like that are up now, but those have been completed and the markings are in place now. Larkwood, that one's in progress. So next slide. $90,000. Again, we paired that with the neighborhood street safety program from the Go Bond, and we're in design. We've just completed our 75% design. And so that plan is shown. We were able to really feather this in. It's a retrofit, so there's a lot of existing, you can see on that photo that's embedded in that image. There's just a lot of existing trees and really fancy mailboxes. And so this design really worked with the neighbors to you know, save trees that they wanted saved, and then like go around existing landscaping as much as possible. So it will be built in summer, so it'll be usable for the kids this 2024-25 school year. And this feeds Ponderosa Elementary School. DRT. So this was an exciting project. If you go to the next slide. Yeah. Again, it leveraged a couple of different projects that were going on. So we had some good consultants help work on the project was meant to, is it feasible to create a grade separated trail crossing? You can see from that profile at the bottom, we think it'll work really well. They found they're pre-built bridge girders and things like that you would just have to build up the fill. You can see all those really close contour lines on the edges of the road. So if you could create that, then you could kind of just drop in a bridge. Is it's not that wide. So it was pretty exciting on that. Next slide. So we utilized about $8,000, and they were able to come up with, yes, it is feasible. You could use a delivered prefabricated steel truss, IPE wood decking, about 500,000, a little bit less. MOB approach grading is the other half. So we've come up with a really rough cost estimate of about $1 million would be required for construction. We don't have the ability to fund that at this time, so we'll be able to utilize this information to look through the city's CIP and other funding opportunities in the future. So to put a bow on everything, we're anticipating another 16,000 needed for 25,000 out of the 90, which means we can unencumber 65,000 and could reassign that. We'll work with Andrea on that.
Hey, Robin,
Yeah,
can
Robin,
I make a comment here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that, I've had some talks with Garrett Saborin at the city and others about this project. And this is a project that we are very, very supportive of. We think that it would be an incredible addition to the trail system. And we've been kind of waiting to see the results of this feasibility study. And I'm anticipating more conversations between the Park District and the city in terms of, how can we fundraise for this project? How can we seek grants and how can we kind of get this thing across the finish line? Because it's something that we're very supportive of, and we're very grateful that the city undertook kind of this preliminary feasibility analysis. So hopefully more to come in this one.
Yeah, agreed. And if you guys have been out there today, it's not that there's a lot of volume on Archie Riggs Road with an at-grade crossing, but the sightlines, the road is so curvy. The trail crossing comes in just at a location where it's just not ideal. So having that grade separation will really improve the safety and just usability of this corridor.
Yeah, I agree. I think that once you get that there, there'll be a lot more usability, because right now it's difficult and dangerous. So that's good.
Bike lane safety enhancements. 3rd Street. So 3rd Street. Let's see, this one's 2nd Street. So it was on 4 corridors: 2nd, 3rd, 9th, and 15th Street. And 2nd Street, we've completed design on that. It's a 36-foot wide street today, and we're able to restripe it with 2-foot buffers, 11-foot travel lanes. The bus barn is right there, and some industrial buildings. So we went out and we did some field testing to see how narrow we could make those lanes. And we're actually going to be able to order delineators and install delineators as an expansion of the Wilson corridor, which is right around the corner, which is utilizing a protected bike lane system. So this will be able to tie that up to the new timber yards master plan development, and tie into a city enhanced crosswalk of 2nd Street and Wilson, which ties into the city's neighborhood greenway design. If we delay design's complete, if we delay construction until next summer, the city will be able to utilize a pavement preservation project. So again, that ability to leverage. So the city crews are out there. There's a grind and inlay that's going on next summer. So we'll be able to come in right after that with this striping plan.
And Robin, is this just from Wilson up to like Pawnee? Kind of that
Yeah.
stretch? Okay.
Yeah, it's Wilson to Ani, and with the Pave Pres project, we'll also do an enhanced crossing of to Ani, so that we can create a connection between Ani and 2nd.
Thank you.
3rd Street's completed. So we designed it with the 2nd Street package. We hired a stripe remover crew out of the valley to come in and use a water-based hydroblast to remove the old stripes. You can see where the old stripes were. And so we basically just shifted everything over, shrunk the 2-way left turn lane just a little bit, but really shrunk the outside lane and the inside lane quite a bit. So that's a 5.5-foot bike lane. And there was no bike lane out on 3rd. And this runs between, you can see the traffic signal at Wilson there, and then back towards the railroad. So this went from Davis to Wilson, and there was just no bike lane out there before. And so south of Wilson, there was a bike lane. North of the rail, there is a bike lane. And so there is this missing gap from an old Pave Pres program that just, this area didn't get paved and restriped. So there's actually an overlay that was scheduled for next summer. So we were really looking forward to being able to do this then, but that got delayed. And so that's going to be in about 3 years. So we decided to go ahead and finish this one. And we tied it in with there was missing sidewalk out there. So the crew restriped this and installed some sidewalk. So I don't have a photo of it, but it looks really good out there if you're over by the railroad and Miller Avenue.
Good.
9th and 15th, we tied those in with a Pave Pres program. And so we were able to do brand new striping and utilize the grant just for additional materials. So that's completed. I am seeing a little bit more ridership. I don't have any counts to prove that, so that's just anecdotal. But it connects towards Bend High. We still have a little bit of gap to get to Bend High, but it ties right into the new Wilson corridor on both ends. So it's really nice. And then on 15th, it goes down to Reed Market Road where we can tie into the Larkspur Trail and the COHCT Trail. So it's a nice connector. Colorado Planning Study. This project, we were trying to get ahead. We're working really hard with our planning team at the city. We were trying to get ahead of the master planning that was being done for the Timber Yards project, and we weren't able to. So Timber Yards is approved. So we're trying now to figure out a new one. Happy to work with you guys on what to do with this funding. One idea, Timber Yards is on the hook for some improvements at the signal and at Sizemore in Colorado, and we're thinking that they're going to utilize an in lieu clause that's in their master plan that they can provide funds to the city, and then we'd be able to leverage a little bit larger project. We wanted to use the basis of the Colorado-Arizona work. We've already got this 30% design concept that was approved, thumbs up approval by ODOT and the city a little bit ago, where we were looking at external truck aprons and an improved connection. There's a pathway that comes from the north and a pathway that comes from the south, but no good way through the signal for walk and bike. So kind of up in the air still. And then this is Kevin's project. So I'll just give this brief overview, and Kevin, you can chime in. But this is the largest grant, STBG grant, and we were again able to leverage additional funds. There's transportation funds going into it, accessibility funds, some GO bond funds, and the goal is to create this one north-south, one east-west enhanced facility, utilizing kind of the best facility aspects that we've got out there, some trails, some neighborhood greenways, and then filling in those gaps and tying that to the city's wayfinding signage and rebranding the whole thing as bikeways instead of low stress network. Design, they've got the design team on. Design will proceed through 2024, and then it's anticipated that construction's in 2025. Riverfront. So Riverfront, the map.
Oh, Robin, we have one question.
Kind of a question
Oh, great.
On the Bend Park, Bright Bikeway, okay. The ODOT's making that multi-use, going from more or less 97, Knott Road intersection, 97 there, going down to, all the way down to, the, Lava Visiting Center. That's going to connect to, Sun River. I was just wondering, if you got anything tying that into your bikeways?
There's a plan for a Parks District and city, combined facility along Knott Road that would tie in that very south piece. You can see 27th and Knott. It's the very bottom corner of this map. So we'd be able to there's a shared use path that goes to Caldera High School, that's highlighted in yellow, at the very south. And then there's a couple of options. We're applying for arts funding for 2 different small pieces, one near China Hat, one near Broster House. And then I'm putting together a small piece at Country Club right in the middle, but there's going to be gaps out there for a while. Just the ability to kind of piecemeal some projects together until we get a larger project out there. But yes, the goal is to connect it with another path. So then you'd have the path coming from the ODOT network, Baker area. You'd have the path along Knott, and then you'd have this path that goes along 15th, connects through Nottingham, and then ties into both the COHCT trail east-west and then Larkspur north-south. So path to path to path.
Great. Thanks, Robin.
Riverfront. Okay, so this is the small little section circled in red on the Deschutes River Trail. It's adjacent to Henry's project that he talked about with the Gilchrist Bridge. The photo shows the limits of the project. It goes from Galveston Avenue along Riverfront Street, past the Gilchrist Footbridge Alley, and then ties into Miller's Landing. Next slide. Again, we were able to leverage funding, really healthy funding from BPRD, and this grant to utilize to move into a design. So we have the design scope of work. We're working to create a signed contract. And we were able to process an IGA with Parks and the city to create this partnership. We're anticipating that design is completed in 2025.
Robin, with this project, I know there were some funding issues to get, to move into the design. There were insufficient funds to move through the full design process. Have those been resolved?
I can chime in, or Brad can chime in, because Brad and I have been really the points working on this. So we think they're mostly resolved at this point. As part of our IGA with the city, we've agreed to essentially match dollar for dollar every dollar the city spends on the design. There was, the designs came in, our original order of magnitude estimates were around $500,000. And the contract price that they're currently negotiating is a little bit higher. So they're at $683,000. So we're still kind of looking into the exact language of the IGA to make sure that we don't have to make any changes to that IGA. But, we've committed to fund dollar for dollar up. I think we're pretty comfortable with matching the SDBG grant award amount, which would give us essentially the 100% contract price plus a little bit of wiggle room in there. We're just kind of going through some of the background mechanics to make sure that we don't need to change that IGA. But I think at this point we don't need to, and we should be pretty solid for the designs.
It's good to hear. Good deal. Yeah, this project has been, it's been in the works for so long, and it's every time we look at it, it gets more complex and more complicated. But, I think both the city and the park district are really committed to getting these 100% designs completed. So we actually know what's going on out there. And then we can shift gears and figure out how we're going to pay for construction.
Yeah. So Andrea, the one question I have on the second year of Kevin's project, I know we've gone through the fund exchange for year one, but I don't have any record that we've gone through the fund exchange process with ODOT for year two.
And is year 2, is that 2024?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me follow up on that. We are right now kind of in the middle of working with ODOT, some of the future funding estimates that we had received previously
Okay.
came in a little lower. I think, you know, it will be fine, but we're trying to work with them. So after 2024, we had been holding off having those funds go out. But let me double check on that. And then I'll follow up with you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any questions?
Before I jump, yeah, any other questions for Robin? Because I think she's through all of her slides and projects. If not, then Andrea, you're up for the final project.
Yeah, so this was a Bend Pine School District project, so safe routes to school.
I'm here so I can address it.
Oh,
if
you
want.
are? Okay, great, Sharon.
So, don't mean to steal your thunder.
No, go for it.
I apologize for being late. I had a dental appointment and anyway, you don't need the gory details, but I had hoped to have more of an exhibit for you today. ODOT was doing some final survey work and they had said they would be able to get it to be by last Friday, but I haven't received it yet. So instead of having a really cool 2 alternatives for ADA access, we have this map that Andrea thankfully put together. So what we're trying to do is connect up a pedestrian ADA accessible way from Neff up to Juniper Elementary. And this is it's a $50,000 conceptual plan grant, and ODOT is delivering it for us. And at this point, we have 2 alternative paths. One, which will kind of snake up the west side, and the other kind of wraps around the east side. And hopefully I'll have those maps and surveys to share at the next meeting or even in between. And then we will evaluate which we think is the most suitable for our needs, kind of the community needs, and which is the most economically feasible, and work with Robin in the city, because the next phase is construction, which my understanding, Robin, you correct me if I'm wrong, is part of the GO bond. So that's where we are. I'm hoping to have this final design concepts soon.
Yeah. So this is the lead up. We wanted to be able to allow the school district time to work on what path and route location would work best for their site. This is part of the city's bikeways network and creating that tie between the neighborhood greenway coming in at the bottom of the screen on Norton, and then coming out at the top of the screen on Neff Road towards the hospital and Big Sky Park. And so this was that unknown way to get down this very steep hillside. So working with ODOT surveyors and trying to get an accessible and wide enough route. So this was a great award and use of these dollars just to give us time outside of the GO bond project to get this work done and lined up in front of that project.
And I have to say, Robin and I have been working on this for 10 or 15 years, I think.
Yeah, it's you know, it's so fun to be able to see this come to fruition, because I've walked this site with several different school district facilities managers, starting, you know, really when my daughter was in kindergarten at this school. She is now a freshman in college. And so that's just this, like, the time it takes to get these projects in fruition. And we've got it on the TSP now, so it's a mapped facility. It's got some funding, and so there's a little bit more momentum. But yeah, a long span.
Yay, and thanks, Robin, for all your dedication
Yeah.
and hard work to make this happen.
Yeah.
All right, thank you both. Any questions about any of the projects we walked through? Not, we will move on.
Hey, Tyler. Oh, yeah, I've got a meeting conflict, so I'm gonna leave a little bit early, but thank you guys for having us, and of course for all the funding, and it's great to hear all the progress on the project, so. And then what's the
Thanks,
date
Henry.
for the policy board meeting? That's coming up, right?
It's next
15.
Friday.
Next Friday, okay.
15, I believe.
Is that
Yeah,
at kind of
15.
like the county building
That would be at ODOT.
at ODOT? Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you make sure I can get you a calendar. I'll send the invite.
Thank you, guys. Sorry to miss your presentation, Brad.
Right, next up is Brad Tower from the city of Bend, and he is going to walk us through and discuss the Bend pedestrian network implementation plan. And I think Brad is online.
Yep, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Alrighty, so as stated, go ahead.
Okay, take it away. I'll just let you jump in.
Okay, yeah, just Brad Tower here, project engineer with the city of Bend. I work in the transportation and mobility department, and here to present today the pedestrian implementation plan project that we wrapped up about 6 months ago. This plan is just an initial step towards the creation of a citywide low-stress pedestrian network. And before jumping in, just the purpose of this presentation is to give more of a high-level understanding of what we did in the project and what the purpose of it was. But if there's any, if greater level of detail is desired in the meeting agenda, there's a link to the project webpage. So it's under the City of Bend's website under transportation and mobility. And then the pedestrian network plan, there's a PDF document that the consultant produced, which goes into much greater detail. I'll do my best to answer any questions today, but just feel free to reference that if more detail is desired. So next slide, please. All right, so project background. What's the reason for this project? So the City of Bend's transportation system plan highlighted that there's a need for more pedestrian planning as far as our pedestrian infrastructure is concerned. And so this project was intended to address that, to come up with a pedestrian plan with a focus on that infrastructure, with a heavy emphasis on equity, which is one of the city council's main priorities. And in order to do this, to come up with the pedestrian plan, there was a desire to have a heavy emphasis on data, like have it be very data centric, so it's transparent and you can kind of see what inputs went into the ultimate outcomes that we came up with as far as where the priorities are around the city. And we can go into that later in the presentation here. So next slide, please. So this is the kind of going to that data analysis approach I was just alluding to. So we leverage GIS, which is a mapping tool. So you can visually represent, you can basically compress a bunch of different data sets into a visual map representation of whatever your interest is in. So, and I'll go into this in later detail in the subsequent slides here, but there's like three main data sets that we used to compile and create various maps to come up with where we determine the priority is around the city for pedestrian infrastructure. Three of those data sets we have a preliminary base data set, which I'll go into the individual pieces of that here in a moment, the transportation analysis zones, and the transportation disadvantaged population index. So, this exhibit here is supposed to depict, basically we've got a bunch of different data from the city, the county, statewide data, other entities like Cascade East Transit. As we were compiling that data, we identified what data is useful. There are some data sets that are a little outdated. They're not kept up to date. So we wanted to make sure that not to just blindly take the data sets, but sift through them, make sure they were quality data. And then after that, when we, as we're like compressing all this data, we came up with basically a 0 to 1 metric with all the different individual constituents of the data, if you will. And like I said, I'll get into that in some of these subsequent slides. A score of 0 to 1. So if let's say there was maybe there's safety data. So if there's the street segment that has the highest number of crashes would have a score of 1, and a street segment that has no crash data would be 0, and then everything would be calibrated based on that. So and now all that data would be compressed and put into, so this at the bottom left of the slide here, you'll see what that center line depicts is it's the center line of the various streets all around town. This will make more sense in the next slide. And then as we input all the data into each street segment, it will result in a thicker or thinner line, which represents a higher or lower priority for pedestrian infrastructure. So next slide, please. So this is the first of the 3 major data sets I was talking about, which is the preliminary base. So with the preliminary base, I'm just going to quickly go through the data that is a part of that. And then obviously you can see the visual output. So a dark line signifies very high priority, whereas a lighter or more faint line is a lower priority for pedestrian infrastructure. So the data that went into this was existing sidewalk inventory, whether it's completely absent or if it's just on one side of the road or the other. Safe routes to school, whether these street segments were part of a route to the various schools around town. Transit routes was a factor. Next slide, please. Continuing with the preliminary base data, we also looked at park walk sheds, safety. So that's what I was just alluding to a moment ago. Is there existing data of crashes that have existed in the past? And transportation system plan are key routes. That's like what the city developed as like high priority areas or these routes for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's data set 1. The next slide, please. This is where the equity lens comes in. So again, there's a big equity emphasis on not only where's sidewalk missing in town, but can we help prioritize where around town that is with an additional equity lens. So the Transportation Disadvantaged Population Index data set includes elderly populations, 65 and older, youth populations under 18, non-white and Hispanic populations, limited English proficiency population, low-income populations, households without access to a vehicle, people with a disability, and crowded households. And just as a mental sanity check here, I think most folks that are familiar with the city of Bend, the fact that this has a little bit of a skew to the east part of town as well as the north part of town. I think if you're familiar with the area, that's a good mental sanity check. I think that's pretty accurate. And next slide, please. So this is the last major data set, which is housing, employment, and population. The data sets referred to as the Transportation Analysis Zone. These are pedestrian destinations of interest. So we incorporated into our model municipal buildings, libraries, parks, schools, stadiums, viewpoints, shopping centers, post offices. And now the intent of this is if you're looking at the need for pedestrian infrastructure, you need people are going somewhere, and so you need destinations of interest that are within reach by walking. So this is the 3rd major data set. Next slide, please. So just as a visual representation, a reminder, so these are the 3 data sets that we had compiled. Next slide, please. Now we took all three of those and we overlaid them one another. Again, this is all just using the GIS mapping tool so that we came up with one overarching map to identify, okay, where are some of these priority areas around town? Next slide, please. Okay, so then when we had this map, which incorporated all those different data sets, we could start seeing a bit of a theme in terms of where the highest priorities are around town. We then took an additional step after that and tried to isolate clusters of areas around town where there's a theme of high pedestrian need. Next slide, please. Now, before proceeding with diving even further into the details, I just want to emphasize that even though this was a data-driven approach, we did not do away with the human element. So there were multiple workshops where we had representatives from different city departments, as well as outside the city. We had a workshop here just in our transportation mobility department conference room where we just got a large, I think there's about 15 of us, a group of people together. And we just basically criticized or just critiqued the data, looked at what the output was, went through our own mental sanity checks to ask, does the data make sense? Because I think just blindly trusting a model is not good practice. So just want to emphasize that was a step involved in the process, was taking a close look at what the data outputs were. Next slide, please. Okay, so after we had the humans kind of, or the team members basically do the sanity check, we then identified what we called areas of high pedestrian need, and we had 10 clusters identified. So this is where, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier in the slide, there's like two overarching elements of this project. There's the equity lens where we compressed all this data to try to identify where in town that the highest needs are for pedestrian infrastructure. But then to coincide with that, or to go along with that, there's an effort to collect data within those 10 zones here that's been identified of, okay, what's the actual quality of the existing pedestrian infrastructure that we have? Because we didn't have that data to begin with. So that's where this company PathView came into play. Next slide, please. PathView is what they have is it's basically a baby stroller, and they walk it all around. So all those areas that are identified in that previous slide, individuals with PathView depicted here, walked along all the pedestrian infrastructure in those areas. And with that tool there, they collected things like path type, obstructions, surface type, roughness, sidewalk or path width, running slope, cross slope, level change. Next slide, please. And we got an output that looks similar to this. So this is just one particular zone that we looked at, but we have an entire map that highlights on a score of basically 0 to 100 the quality of that sidewalk. Basically, is it compliant sidewalk, or is there need for improvement? Next slide, please. So you can actually, when we receive this data, so the top picture there, that's actually a Google Earth image. So you can actually just pull this data right into Google Earth, zoom in and start looking at the various areas to see where in town is there existing pedestrian infrastructure, but it's actually deficient infrastructure. And the picture beneath, again, kind of similar to what I was referencing previously, we took that additional step, that human element, to review the data to make sure that it's accurate. So it might be a little hard to see in the presentation here, but in the bottom picture, you'll see a green line that transitions to red, yellow, and then back to green. And if you look at the sidewalk underneath it, it actually looks like that's a pretty accurate representation where, moving from left to right, you have a smooth set of sidewalk that all of a sudden gets very broken up. And then further up into the right into the screen, looks like it's better quality sidewalk. So just, again, that additional human element to double check that the data we collected was representative of what's actually out there in the field. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we compiled everything to start identifying a prioritized project list. So in the image in the top left, that's taking both. So the areas that we considered was based on that first element of the project, which I said was compressing all the data with an equity lens and highlighting the areas around town that were of highest importance. Then within those areas, then we looked at where is there missing sidewalk and where is there deficient sidewalk, which was that second element that we went around town collecting that data to see where is there sidewalk that's actually deficient. And with that, then we further added weights to our model there. So in that depiction, you can see kind of like lighter purple lines. Those are more residential streets. We determined those as a slightly lower priority. The thicker red lines were higher priority based on, again, if there's missing sidewalk and or deficient sidewalk. And then we started, this is where more of the human element again came in, was we started looking at various areas within these 10 zones to try to identify, okay, what are some projects that we could identify? What would make sense for if funding became available, what you could call a one cohesive project. So in the bottom right image there, this would be an example. And there's a lot more examples and breakdowns of this as indicated in that PDF document on our webpage. But just in this example, we looked at both sidewalk segments as well as crossings. So it may be hard to see the numbers, but we identified the various projects based on based on a numbering system that we had, both for the intersections and the segments with missing sidewalk. And this would be one example of a project that we identified. So if we had funding necessary, we'd say, okay, here's 2 intersections and 1 length of roadway that needs both enhanced crossings and sidewalk to be constructed. Yeah, I think that's good there. And then next slide, please. And then this is just a depiction of what would those improvement projects look like. This isn't an exact one-to-one comparison, but just for visual representation. We identified areas around town, such as this, where in the top left you can see there's missing sidewalk on the left side of the image there, and not a great crossing for pedestrians. Whereas in the lower right segment, you can see on both sides of the road there's sidewalks as well as a much improved pedestrian crossing. So that's the ultimate output of this project. Just to kind of sum everything up here, was once we had identified the areas of highest importance, then narrowed that down even further to, okay, where are some projects that we can identify? We now have a list of prioritized projects. We call them our prospectus sheet, so I think there's about a dozen sidewalk projects, as well as the crossings pre-identified, just for easy reference. I think, next slide, please. So next step. So there's a few things here. Now that we have the data, now that we have that tool created, we have what we call like this living map tool. So we can continue to update this as we implement the projects around town. The areas where we collected sidewalk data, whether it's deficient sidewalk or good quality sidewalk, as new projects address those deficiencies, we can update that data set to better represent our existing inventory of sidewalk. And then the other part of it, the living map tool, is, so this first effort had an emphasis on equity, but we still have all that data compressed with all the various weights of the individual data that went into that. And so if there was some future consideration to focus more on safe routes to school or something of that nature, we could actually tweak the model a little bit to skew away from an emphasis on equity and an emphasis in some other area. Additionally, this creates synergy opportunities for city projects. So a lot of times we'll have funding for a project like a capital improvement project, and there's often opportunities where that project is just adjacent to another project that we've already identified here with this effort, or it may even be part of within the CIP project. So one good mental sanity check that we had with this project, or a good reinforcement, was there were quite a few projects that we identified that could be potential projects for sidewalk improvements that are actually already being captured with other city projects. One example is Bear Creek. That's an active CIP project right now. So they'll actually address one of the projects we highlighted with this pedestrian implementation plan. Going forward, it also helps prioritize funding to other higher need areas. So, if we have funding to spend on public or pedestrian infrastructure, where do you spend that money? Well, we already have like a list of projects ready to go, already identified, and the justification for that. So, we can better spend whatever type of funding that becomes available. And then additionally, we can use this, when requesting funding, it's a further justification, when we're looking for additional funding for future potential projects. So with that, I think that's all I had here, just kind of a high level overview of what we did and the results of that, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Anybody in the room have questions, or anybody online have questions for Brad? All right. Thank you, Brad. That was excellent.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Next agenda item. I just wanted to spend a minute just checking with everybody. We've been meeting on the first Wednesday. We've been on the first Wednesday schedule for quite a while. I just wanted to verify that the first Wednesday schedule still works for everyone and well into the new calendar year. We're going to be meeting with our plan update process. We will be bringing quite a bit of information to you. We just want to make sure that we were able to have good attendance at all of our 2024 meetings. Anybody have any comments or questions about meeting date and time? So we have a little bit of time. If anybody has updates on projects or programs that they'd like to share with the rest of the group.
I have one from CET that this group, I think, would be very interested in. So if you recall, a number of years ago, we've had some neighbors of ours around 3rd and Hawthorne that weren't too thrilled with our buses spilling out on the neighborhood roads. We did go under a design and engineering study to redesign the front parking lot and the 2 back parking lots to make them more effective in bringing the buses onto the Hawthorne property. I will say that study is now complete. The design is complete. The permits are there, and we awarded the construction project to Knife River. They will start construction in March of 24. It will be one of those scenarios where it's going to be a little worse before it gets better, as certain areas of property are offline. But the goal is by summer of 24, all of the fleet that you see queuing, particularly on the south side of Hawthorne near the Safeway complex and on 4th, will be queuing on our property, as well as our intercity providers. And so that's going to be quite the logistical nightmare for the agency for a few months. But the ultimate goal is to have a much more less noisy and conflicting area on 3rd and Hawthorne and 4th. Dave.
Thanks. Just wanted to give people that haven't been paying attention quick update on the county's transportation system plan update. Commissioners held a public hearing last week. I think the supporters of active transportation turned out in force. No idea what the commissioners are going to decide, but they seem to be planning on holding their deliberation in December. So should find out what's going to happen here in the next few weeks. If anybody still wants to submit a public comment, the written record is open until 4 p.m. today. So your last chance. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else have updates they'd like to share with the group? All right, thank you. And just one last opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone online or in the room who wants to share anything. All right, and then our next TAC meeting is scheduled for January 9th at 10 a.m. We're going to be out at ODOT Region 4 in the Bainey Conference Room. If you recall, this is just to note the change of dates and location. This meeting will be 2 hours and will be focused almost solely on the MPO plan update process. So please try to attend either remotely or in person if you can. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.